Hi, folks. I think we'll start. If there are more people joining in, they can just join in. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm glad to be able to do this. I want this to be mostly a place for people to ask questions, and for me to answer to the best of my ability. But I'll start with a brief introduction about myself and also about the fellowship. And after that, I will leave it up to you for questions. I mean, preferably you ask me your questions by unmuting yourself, but if that's not possible, you can also type in your questions and I can answer it from there. Before we start, just on housekeeping, I am recording this session and I will send it across to other people who it could help. And for this to be a resource for people who apply for this fellowship this year or the years after. I hope that's okay with everyone. And beyond that, if you have any question in between when I'm speaking or anything, please feel free to raise your hand. I would love for this to be more interactive than for it to be just me talking. So very, very happy for to be interrupted. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I'm Sukanya. I'm assuming you found me through my LinkedIn, but if in case you haven't seen me, seen my LinkedIn profile, I am from India. I'm from Mumbai in India, but I have been studying and working a little bit everywhere um, within India. I happened into the climate change space. I originally studied political science and public policy at Ashoka University and the Indian School of Public Policy. And I happened into climate change through solid waste management when I was a Chief Minister's Fellow in Haryana. I then I led the solid waste management department of Carpe Ecosattva, which is this not-for-profit startup hybrid that is based out of Aurangabad in Maharashtra. And then I was a strategy and policy manager for Air Pollution Action Group in Delhi. I have now been in Germany since January as a part of this International Climate Protection Fellowship. And I applied with a project that was like a project proposal that was supposed to look at the climate action plan and the development plan of Mumbai city and then find synergies. Once I came here, I modified my project a little bit along with my host, quite a lot actually. I changed my project quite a lot, and along with when I was talking to my host. If anyone would like more details about that, we can get into it later. But basically continue to work in the urban governance climate space. So I mostly look at both policy and implementation for urban climate action, so city level climate action around the world. And about the fellowship, I'm sure all of you have already read the website and probably also the FAQs that I had put out. But it's a 1 year fellowship if you are 12 to 24 months, depending on whether you are a prospective leader or a postdoc. Um, I can only speak about my experience as a prospective leader and not as a postdoc because that's how I'm here. When I'm talking about it, my experience of it has been as a prospective leader, applying for it as a prospective leader, and doing the fellowship as a prospective leader. And of course, all of this is my opinion. This is not fact. And please take it with the understanding that this is one person's opinion of the fellowship, and everyone who has experienced and applied to this fellowship will have different experiences. But yes, this is a fellowship which is 12 to 24 months, and in this fellowship, along with additional German courses if you want to take it, which are optional. And during this fellowship, you work on your own research project, but also through the fellowships, through the organization, the foundation, they organize study tours across Germany twice, once during the start and then once in the midterm during October. and we get to know each other and also get to know a lot of the climate space within Germany. So this is it. This is my brief introduction. I would love for the rest of this to just be questions and answers. So if anyone has any specific questions about applying, about finding hosts, about the fellowship, about anything else, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me. I'm happy to answer.
Hi, Sukanya. May I go
Yes.
first?
Hi.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for accepting. I mean, we got connected through LinkedIn, and thank you for organizing this. This is very helpful. So, I'm an industrial ecology researcher. I primarily deal with industries and how to convert their waste into wealth. So, I had led a project in adopting one industry in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat, in India. And through this climate protection fellowship, I plan to do the same concept in Germany as well, in collaboration with either in Germany or through their guidance and do this in India. So, look, my primary interest is in industries. So, how to make that work? So, I have two questions at this stage. That one is that um, how friendly are the universities in Germany? If I send a proposal, will they usually revert back, or do I need to develop a network or an approach through a network, or is it a straightforward process? And second is, I would also love to convert this into a master's degree. Like it's a 12 months, which I'm planning. And is there any opportunity, if you know, that I can convert that research phase after this 1 year into a master's degree, probably pursue another 12 months and convert into master's degree after that? Yeah.
Right. Thanks. So, on your first question on how friendly and approachable people are, I had no network in Germany before I applied. I cold emailed people. I absolutely knew no one. And to my pleasant surprise, there were a lot of replies. It wasn't. It wasn't 100% hit rate, obviously, but I would have written to maybe 20 people, got maybe five responses, out of which two were positive, and then I spoke to those two professors. So it's not, and I had to send a follow up email in most cases to get any response. So, yes, it's not 100% hit rate, but I did it without knowing anyone, so I'm sure you could also. What is not in your favor right now is that, especially in universities, the universities go on break during the Christmas, New Year time. So you may lose people, but you should try writing anyway. I don't think there is any harm writing to people, and you should be able to hear back from them. And it shouldn't be particularly hard to get responses from people if you write to them with a one pager or with a proposal and with why you are interested in them specifically. You should be able to hear back from them. I had in my FAQ template left my one page proposal, and I had also left the cold email that I wrote to professors. So you could look at those two and use them as starting points. I'll also link that in the chat sometime right now so that everyone here can also see it. And for your second question, the fellowship itself is not a master's program. It's a 12-month research fellowship. But if you are working with the university, I came as a guest researcher. So that's my visa. My visa is not a student visa. So I cannot enroll as a student in the university, right? But if you come in as a student, so if you speak to your university and enroll as a student, which is possible. I have a batchmate from this fellowship who is working at the University of Kassel, but instead of coming under the guest researcher visa, she has come under the student visa. So she's registered as a student within the university. And so she pays the semester fee and she has access to the university facilities and university housing, and all of that becomes much easier also. And I'm guessing that if you are enrolled as a student, then of course you can speak to your professor and figure out how to make it a master's program and how to make this like 1 year out of your 2 years master's program. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Just one more clarity.
Yeah.
So, in terms of student visa, so then I have to apply it as a master's program itself, right? Or is it a mutual understanding between the professor and myself that how can we work towards after, at the end of 12 months?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to talk to your professor. But if
Okay,
you write to me after this, I can put you in touch with my friend who's doing this fellowship this year and has applied under the student visa. And you can figure out and talk to her and understand how she went about it.
that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Omkar,
Hello.
hi.
Yeah, yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
First of all, Sukanya, thanks a lot for initiating this and guiding us for this fellowship. So I have one question. So if I'm not wrong, last year we had two different kinds of fellowship, and one of them is now closed. And they have it was similar actually, but the one is closed, and now it is more about the climate, right? But considering your topic, when I go through your details, I understood that solid waste management can be considered as one of the concern for climate. So on those lines, last year I had applied, as you correctly said, a lot of cold emails to people from GIZ and all of that, and most of the universities. I got few responses, but uh, uh, to be specific to a question, what would I ask is it better to directly work with the university's professors or organizations like GIZ or other, which is better, to get a host in a quick time?
So thanks for your question. And yeah, solid waste management is a climate problem, right? Like it is both, it is fundamental to mitigation. Wet waste is one of the greatest sources of methane emissions, which is 4 times more potent than carbon emissions, and so on. So, solid waste management is a big component of climate action, and also is part of most cities in India, but also around the world. When they make their climate action plan, they deal with solid waste. So, no questions about it. Solid waste management is climate action. And in terms of where your responses, in terms of the two fellowships, yes, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation is a foundation, right? And it hosts a lot of fellowships. Most of its fellowships are either postdoc for fellowships, or they are for professors, for late career academics. So it's a very heavily academic, scientific foundation. But it has it has or had these two young professional sort of fellowships. And what was unique about these fellowships is that they aren't just for academics, but also for people who work in the field. So people like me, or people like a lot of us who are here, who aren't in academia, who didn't study these things in their masters or whatever else, but rather do this for a living, do the actual implementation. And it gives forums for people like us to come and do academic research, to build our academic base, and then implement the solutions that we learn through this fellowship. So unfortunately, they have shut the German Chancellor Fellowship down. This year's batch was the last batch of the fellowship, and that was a broader fellowship. So that was for only for 5 countries. So it was 6 countries, BRICS and USA. Those are the only countries that could apply, and but it had bigger batches. So I don't know this correctly, but it used to have 10 people from each country. So I think it was a cohort of 50 or 60 people. Whereas the International Climate Protection Fellowship is also a young professional fellowship, but it is only for people in the climate space. And for both academics and young professionals, so prospective leaders in the climate space. And it is not just for specific countries, it's for anyone from the global south. So as long as it's a developing country, everyone can apply, and there are only 15 fellows every year. So that's the fundamental difference between these two fellowships. But yes, now this year onwards, the only fellowship that does exist is this climate protection fellowship. In terms of who you should apply to, both are like, there's no right or wrong answer. You could apply to any company or any university. By the rules of the fellowship, you could have a host. As long as they are a entity registered in Germany, they could be a host. For the fellowship, it doesn't matter whether it's a university or no. In terms of getting responses, uh, it's not impossible to get responses from either. I started late, so in my sense, I started in October looking for hosts, and so I kept my search limited to only academics, because they have a sense of what the foundation is, and have a sense of these programs where you're funded by someone else to be in their space, and also writing a research proposal for an academic space seemed easier to me. But there are a lot of people who work with NGOs and with organizations, including GIZ. And GIZ this time, the transport department in GIZ, for example, has put out a call inviting people to work with them. This other, I forget their name, but if you look at my reshares in LinkedIn, you will see it. But they work on carbon credits, and they had a fellow this year also, Analia. And they also put out a call asking for fellows. So there are a lot of organizations within Germany that are looking for AVH fellows. So you could apply to anyone. I would say that if you find someone who is active on LinkedIn in any of these companies, write to them on LinkedIn, because people tend to reply on LinkedIn, and then you can go from there. Does that answer the question, Umkar?
That's great. That's great.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sukanya.
No problem. Asghar had raised his hand.
Hello everyone. I'm Dr. Asghar from Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. My question is that I have found a host for the program, but I'm confused that whether I opt for a prospective leader program or the postdoc, as the seats are also limited for prospective.
We lost you, Asghar. We can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, I'm facing with the frequent disconnection problem. So I want to continue.
Would you? No, we can hear you now. Maybe you can go again.
May I continue?
Yeah.
I was talking about that whether I opt for the prospective program or for a postdoc program. And I have also consult with a host supervisor, and in the month of January.
I think we lost him. I can answer that question once he comes back. Maybe we go to Karthik now, and then once he's back on the call, we can. Oh, he's back. Asghar is back. Hi.
So sorry again.
Yeah.
As I told that I'm facing with frequent disconnection. So the one thing which remaining is that the proposal. So I need guidance in this regard.
Yes. So you're right that it's generally. So they, according to the official rules, they don't have a exact split between postdocs and prospective leaders. So totally there are 15 fellows who get selected. But the number of postdocs who apply are lower, and the postdocs who get selected are therefore also lower. But it changes from batch to batch. So if you go to the AVH page, if you go to the fellowship page, you will see all the batch details. So you will see all the previous batches and who has gotten in and who has what is the profile of the fellows, and you will see that it's a mix. So I think in my batch, we only have 3 or 4 postdocs, even though technically the average split is 10 prospective fellows and 5 postdocs. But this year there are only 4. And if I remember correctly from the batch before me, there were more than 5 postdocs. So there isn't really a fixed number, although it averages on 10 versus 10 prospective leaders and 5 postdocs. But if you have a PhD, I would think applying for the postdoc makes more sense because you then have the chance of doing it for 2 years. Prospective leaders can only apply for up to 12 months, whereas postdocs can get the same fellowship for up to 2 years. You don't have to take 24 months up, but you can apply to do this fellowship for up to 24 months. And if it is a project, like generally postdocs are longer, and if you are looking at this as a part of your postdoc, it may make more sense to have that be your application rather than applying as a prospective leader, which sort of limits how you can modify your research and how you can go about your research. Yeah, Askar, go ahead.
Thank you for the postdoctoral position. That's clear. And let me guide about the proposal. And I'm intending to develop a proposal on biochar application in agriculture. So as biochar is recently introduced worldwide, they mitigate GHGs as well as they sequester carbon. So I think it will be good for the acquiring the postdoctoral position.
Yeah, sounds great. All the best for your application. Karthik, would you like to go?
Yes, thanks. Is my voice clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is specific to actually I'm doing a PhD, and I want to know that if I can apply with the same topic for this fellowship, and I know this is the fellowship for 12 months, 1 year. So is it possible? There is a possibility that my PhD topic, which I'm gonna apply with this topic into the fellowship, so it can exceed the time limit of this fellowship. So maybe it took me to complete 1.5 or 2 years to complete this topic and research. So what's your opinion on this? Can I modify? Should I modify my topic, or should I apply with the limited topic that it can be done within the period of this fellowship?
Yeah, so the fellowship, when you're submitting the proposal for your fellowship, they ask very specifically for your methodology and your timeline. And everywhere, including your proposal, including your presentations and your interviews, they put a lot of focus on how you plan to get this done in the time limit that you have been given. So if you're proposing something that you are very sure you can't do in 12 months, then you will find it hard to justify in your proposal and in your interviews how you would finish this in the given time limit, right? So
Right.
I would suggest that you have a plan. Either you limit your research scope, or you have a plan for how to finish what you're proposing within 12 months, there is a possibility to apply for an extension for up to 3 months. But this year, the foundation, for example, had financial constraints, so it has only given a maximum of 2 months extension per person, and it hasn't given 3 months out. So and this is extra time, right? Like this is supposed to be at the end of your fellowship if you weren't able to accomplish what you set out to accomplish for 12 months. But in your proposal, you have to prioritize creating a plan that you can finish within 12 months, and they really put a lot of emphasis on it. So if you say that you can't, I would assume that that doesn't take you very far.
Okay. And my second question is about the methodology that will propose when I will approach to the host. That methodology should be concise, or it should be brief enough to brief enough to understand that how should I work step by step on this project.
Right. You're saying for approaching and finding a host?
Right.
Okay, so for approaching and finding a host, the way I went about it, and this was advice I got from Ratna, who was in the previous batch, who guided me with my application. She had suggested that I send out a one pager, and I basically made a 1 to 2 pager, right? So mine was about 1.5 pages, and it's linked in that FAQ document. I will link the FAQ document back on this chat. But my one pager basically had the large chunk of it, maybe 3/4 of a page was the project idea, and then I had a couple of paragraphs of methodology, and I had a couple of paragraphs about the timeline. So I would say that if you had it any longer than that, I don't know, especially if you're cold emailing people, if people will read anything longer than that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no problem. Yeah, Omkar.
Yes, Sukanya, I have another question.
Yeah.
So if I talk about solid waste management,
Mm-hmm.
so considering it's a vast topic, and both the countries are, struggling with that. So many times we come up with a lot of research and plans on implementation, but I personally feel that, it's very difficult to implement them on ground.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of practicality, how does it matter when I write a proposal, and when any mentor or any host, or the entire organization who is hosting it, how does the practicality section, does it really matter on that level?
I mean, I think it would depend on what exactly you are proposing, right? Like if it's an academic, I don't know, if it's scientific research on like a laboratory research on what new material can you use to replace plastics, for example, then the scalability of it is not the key point of your research. But if the point of your research is implementation in cities, for example, then of course, whether or not it is implementable and scalable and applicable to your particular geography in India, or your particular context, or whatever context that you're proposing to study, that will matter a lot. So that will depend very much on the kind of research that you're proposing to do, and how core implementation is to that proposal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so are you saying that we should stick to more on the base of a research line rather than actually, thinking about implementing it?
No, I'm not
Can I?
saying. I'm saying it could be either, right? Mine is absolutely on implementation. I propose to study the climate action plan and the development plan of Mumbai city. and see what is the future of implementation. So I didn't study, like when I proposed, when I made a proposal for the foundation, I didn't propose anything that was theoretical. I proposed something that was very, very much rooted in implementation because that was my background. And that is where my experience was. That is what I was interested in. That's what my host was interested in. And that's where I thought I could contribute to academic research, but also to within the fellowship, right? And that was deeply rooted in implementation. But when it is something like that, I'm saying that when it is something like that, it has to be rooted in implementation. Then you can't propose something that is definitely not going to happen. I don't know, like a um, ban on all plastics, right? Like not just single plastics, a blanket ban on all plastics. If you want to study that, I don't know, like unless you really justify it, unless you find a country that has managed to fully ban plastics or is looking at it, or if there is some basis for it, right? Then that makes sense. But of course, you can study ban on single-use plastics, right? Because there are countries that have looked at it. India has tried doing it. What are the successes and failures of it? There's a lot that you can do within implementation that is rooted in possibility, even if it's not 100% chance of success, it is still rooted in reality. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Very true. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, Asghar.
My question is relating to the research proposal. We should develop the proposal keeping in mind the problems of our country or the problems of where we are going to do the research. I mean that if someone is from their own country, so they develop the proposal on own country problems or on the problems of the Germany.
Yeah, so I have sorry, I blanked out a little bit. No, so the project proposal, it I think needs to be rooted in your work. I think there is some guidelines that it has to be to do with your country. It could be your country and Germany. It could be just your country. It could be your country and another country. A few things you need to keep in mind, in my opinion, and from what I know from other previous fellows and the advice they gave me, was that one, it has to be close to your experience, right? So I worked in solid waste management and air pollution, for example. And if I propose to study, I don't know, agriculture or, carbon sequestration in agriculture, where I have absolutely no background, it would be very hard for me to justify why I was capable of doing that, right? It can be an expansion of your subject area. So, like I said, I studied solid waste management and air pollution, and I proposed to study Mumbai's climate action plan, which has 5 main parts: waste management, air pollution, energy, water, so like flood protection, and sustainable transport, right? I had background in 2 out of those 5 things. I had not studied everything that the policy had, but I had a background in some of those things. So you can always expand your scope of research, but it has to have some basis in what you're doing. And secondly, secondly, you have to justify why you have to go to Germany to do this, or to this particular institute and this particular professor to do it, or this particular, I don't know, company to do it, right? Like, why is it that you cannot do this in your in your home institution? So that sort of justification is also essential, and they also ask you these questions during the interview about why you want to come there. And the third is, while there is an expectation that you sort of work on your home country and your home context, there is a limitation of the fellowship, which is that you can't go back. right? So it doesn't allow for field work in your home country during the fellowship. So it has to either be based on field work you did before, or it has to be based on, I don't know, paper, like secondary research, or on the basis of online interviews or something else, some medium that is not physical on ground research, because the fellowship doesn't allow for on ground research. So you have to balance your proposal in a way that it is speaking to the context that you come from and your country, and solving a problem that you have seen, but also keeping in mind that you have to justify why you need to be in Germany to do it, and how you can do it in Germany despite not having access to the context that you're studying.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, Sukanya, so I was just going through your FAQ document. Thank you for putting this together.
Yeah,
So in
sorry,
the
one second.
yeah,
That just reminds me. So I did put the FAQ documents on the chat. So please, for anyone who hasn't already seen it, please have a look at it. I have linked, I have answered some basic questions that I get asked a lot. And I have also linked my my proposal, so my two-pager, which I sent to professors as cold emails, and also the draft of my cold email that I sent out to professors when I was reaching out to people. Yeah, Gokulam, sorry, I cut you off.
yes, no issues. Thank you. So in your one pager, you have mentioned about the Bombay Municipal Corporation, right? I mean, some organization related to climate. So with this organization, you have already collected the data and then you applied the fellowship, or in between the fellowship, you had to travel, or you are seeking data from this organization.
So, like I just mentioned, you are not allowed to go during your fellowship and collect data. I
Okay.
had proposed to do online interviews when I had proposed my methodology. I had proposed to do online interviews. I had not collected this data beforehand. I had intended to come to Germany and then do interviews once I was here. Except that once I came here, when I spoke to my professor, we modified my research a lot. I didn't end up studying Mumbai's climate action plan at all, because it was too broad and I needed to sort of narrow the scope. So one of the five aspects, which is water, so water security and water management, I ended up studying that. And now I'm at a later stage in my fellowship, I'm looking at sustainable transport. So I went, like, with my professor, I modified my work once I came here to cover different aspects. But for both of them, I have only done online interviews, including for the research that I ended up doing. I only did online interviews because under the fellowship, you aren't really allowed to go in person and do interviews. Um, yeah.
Okay. Just another clarity. So the proposal might look better if I include the previous primary research data and the future online interviews. This might would make a better proposal and try to convince the professor in the same research field, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if there is no I mean, if there is no primary data, what you need to convince them is that it is doable online, right? Or
Okay.
that you already have the source, or it's just a literature study which doesn't require interviews. Like, your methodology needs to be something that justifiably you could do sitting in Germany. You can do fieldwork within Europe, that they are okay with, but you can't do fieldwork back in India or back in Pakistan or back wherever else.
Okay. One last question.
Yeah,
So,
no.
in the proposal, generally, when professors review or read the proposal, they look for citation, or in a particular manner, the general research proposal should look like. Is there a is there a specific emphasis on that? Do you feel that professors really look at those elements of a proposal?
I mean, it depends on what proposal you're talking about, right? Like, this is my two-pager. Like, this is not my
Okay.
actual proposal that I submitted to the foundation. That's very long. That's 6-7 pages long, because if you open the website and like create an ID for the application and log in, you will see the kind of questions there are for the fellowship, and they're very, very long. They ask detailed questions on your research proposal, on your methodology, on how you plan to take this back to your context, like, and there's your statement of purpose. There's a lot that goes into the application itself, and this is not that. What I have linked is just a two-pager, like to just like get someone's attention and get them to be interested in being my host. That's what you're seeing over there. Citations is not the biggest thing you're trying to accomplish over there. The point is to convey what you want to do and why you're capable of doing it and how you're planning to do it in the most succinct manner possible. But in your research proposal, in your actual research proposal that you do submit, 100% your citations need to be good, reliable, well cited, and like covering the things that are expected for any good academic proposal, right? Like they cannot be, I don't know, you can't cite Wikipedia, for example. Like they need to be research papers and peer reviewed and all of that. So those are very, very important when you're doing your actual proposal, but that is not what you're seeing right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, Shashi.
Hi, Sukanya.
Hi.
Thanks for organizing this. And I also had a lot of questions, and they were rightly answered by you from four different folks present here.
Okay.
So I just want to, I mean, you're about to complete a year in the fellowship, right? And
Yeah.
I just wanted to know from I mean, you rightly pointed out at the fag end of this session that it's very important for you to justify why you want to be in Germany to study things that is not present in your own country, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in the journey of 1 year you have been in Germany, what are the couple of standout moments for you that you really think that people interested in this fellowship should really consider? I mean, for you, for different people, it can be different, but for you, what has been those 2, 3 standout moments?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. I've had a great time. I've had like a better time than I could have imagined. When I first joined this fellowship, my professor said, and I thought he was just exaggerating. He said the fellowship funds people, not projects. But truly, it's not an exaggeration. I have not seen a foundation be more generous with their support, with very few expectations from you. And like, there is not this sense of, I don't know, over bureaucracy. There is very much trust that you're here to do something good, and the best they can do to support you, they will. And it's been an absolute delight. Um, I came to Germany because I wanted to broaden my context, right? In India, I worked on a lot of problems within India, and they're very important problems, and they're the problems I want to solve. But in the climate, in the scope of climate problems, it's not the only problems. I wanted to broaden my scope to understand a little bit more of the climate space, to broaden that, to broaden my understanding from just what I knew from having worked in India, and also create an academic backing. Because, like I said, I happened into climate. I studied political science and public policy and not climate. So I don't have an academic base in climate, and I wanted to create a little bit of that for myself with my host professor, who's also a political scientist but happens to study climate governance in the global south. Right, and that's why I came here. And in terms of experience, and I absolutely have gotten that, like my sense of the possibilities and the things and the problems that need solving is so much larger than it was a year ago. In terms of my I can't believe this is real moments, is As a part of the fellowship, we went to this island called Film. It's spelled Vilm. It's in the northeast coast of like the Baltic Sea, of Germany, and it's a research island. So it's uninhabited. Nobody lives there. Germans barely know about it. And we got to live there for a whole week. And we attended sessions there, and we roamed around that island, and we lived in houses that were built by former Eastern German bureaucrats for their summer houses. And that was the last time anyone lived there. And for the last many, many, many decades, it's been uninhabited, and it's largely been uninhabited for all of its history. And so you see real nature. And it was truly unimaginable that you got to do this. We got to see the climate supercomputer in Hamburg. We went to Alex Wagner Institute, which is the Polar Institute for Germany. The fellowship paid for my German language courses. I finished B1 in German this week. I now have learned a whole language in the span of a year, and largely paid for. So the foundation paid for it till A2, and my professor generously decided to. My professor in the institute that I'm a part of generously decided to subsidize my B1. So I have learned up to B1 German under someone else's sponsorship. I have learned a whole new language. I can speak to a whole new group of people. I understand a whole new side of the internet because of this 1 year here. And it's been just one amazing experience after the other. And I truly, truly, truly don't have anything to complain about.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, Sashi. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Sukanya.
Hi.
Thank you for organizing this call.
Yes.
I have 4 questions. One, like it's a series, like whole for the process, how the process is.
Maybe
One, we
ask me
get,
one by one because I will not
yeah,
remember.
yeah. No, it is, okay. So one is like, once we get the host, and how much host get involved in the proposal making, or is it us as an individual only needs to cater, or they also give some modification at the start before submitting the proposal? And can you also shed some lights on the selection criteria, as it is mentioned in the timeline that by June they will have some shortlisted candidate, and then there will be a follow-up interviews, virtual, in person, or what are the processes after that? And I have other 2 questions.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I'll answer these two, and then you can ask me your next two. In terms of host, you do the heavy lifting of writing your proposal, obviously. But the way I went about it, and I would assume that this is the way a lot of people who don't already know people in Germany would go about it. Is that I found I actually I had positive responses from two hosts. One is the host I'm with right now, and another one was in another institute. And I spoke to both of them, and they both had inputs to my two-pager, right? So I spoke to them about my two-pager that I had sent, like the basic project idea. I got on a call with them, and depending on their research focus, they asked me to modify my proposal to fit their research interest. So, for example, when I had made my proposal, it didn't have much about multi-level governance, which is what my professor studies, or my professor sort of is an expert in. And when I submitted my final proposal, the big anchoring factor of my proposal was multi-level governance. I was still studying the same thing, but the lens of it was changed on the basis of my professor's area of expertise. And the reason I went ahead with this professor and not the other one was because the modification that professor wanted me to make felt like something that was so far away from what I knew that I wouldn't be able to justify um, justify my capability of doing that research in the fellowship. So during the interviews, right? And so that's how I went about it. And my professor and his team, so someone from his team, a postdoc in his team, who also teaches and who looks at proposals and who writes, who's also an academic, he looked at my proposal, and my professor looked at my proposal, maybe 2 or 3 drafts of my proposal. But I had already sent them. I sent them a draft maybe in the first week of Jan. I had already spoken to them and was in touch with them in uh, before in November, around this time. So before Christmas break, during the Christmas break, I worked on my proposal. I sent them a draft. I had already run that draft through a lot of my friends. And after that, I sent them my draft, to which they gave me a few rounds of feedback, and I reiterated that and then submitted that before the 1st of February. So yeah, your professors have to play a role. You have to sort of co-build your proposal with them, because, like I said, you have to justify why you have to go to that person, right? Like, why is it that you cannot study what you're studying in your home institute, in your home country? Why is it that you have to go to that specific professor in this specific country to study it? And for you to do that, you have to have some sense of synergy between the work you want to do and the work they do. So it is essential that you co-build it, but of course you do a lot of the heavy lifting of writing and editing and all of that. The proposed professors have to write you a statement of, like, a host statement where they have to answer questions like, what is your research potential, and how much did they work with you on the proposal, and have they met you, and things like that. So that they have to do. But beyond that, big work is on your end. In terms of the interview, yes. So once you apply, you don't hear back till June or July. So you apply on the 1st of Feb. So Feb, March, April, May, yeah, 4 or 5 months before you hear back. And once you hear back, you have a few months. So the interviews happen in September over a weekend. So the way it happened for us was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was the interview. On Friday, we knew whether we had gotten into the fellowship. Over there, the shortlist is very short. So it's about, I think there was 21 or 22, under 25 people who were shortlisted for the interviews, and 15 of us made it, right? So over there, the elimination is not so big. The big shortlisting happens from your proposal to the interviews. And over there are a few things, which is you need to present 3 things. One, there is a personal interview where you have to talk about yourself and your journey, and the way any personal interview is, right? So why you are capable of doing this, what has your leadership journey been, why is this research area of interest to you, what do you want to do at the end of your fellowship, and typical questions like these, like behavioral questions of what makes you unique and what makes you the right candidate to get this fellowship. Then there is a project proposal where you have 5 minutes, and they time it exactly. So you have 5 minutes and 3 slides to talk about your project, to describe your project, describe your methodology and timeline, and discuss its impact at the end of the year. And in that, then after the 5 minutes, I don't remember how many minutes it was. I think it's a 10 or 15 minute question round. No, maybe another 5 minutes. I don't remember anymore. But when you get there, reach out to me. I'll look up the details, and we'll be happy to help. But they ask you more questions on the basis of your project proposal, and ask you questions related to that. And the last thing that you have to do is a poster presentation. So it's a 1-page poster covering the same thing: your project, your methodology, your timeline, and the impact that you can create. And it's an open forum. So it's not just for the people who are interviewing you, but for anyone so any participants from um, for the interview, so like other applicants, but also other panelists, because everyone doesn't have the same panelists. They have panelists. So I think 4 interviews happen at the same time. So there's at least 4 sets of panelists. So any of these panelists can come and ask you questions about your projects. So those are the 3 big sort of things you need to prepare for in September when you get there. But I would not focus on that at all right now. I would get to that when you get to that. For now, I would focus on getting a host and writing a proposal and submitting that, because that's a lot of the hard work. That's the hardest thing to do. And once you do that, then when you get to June and July, you can start working on these things. You had 2 more questions?
Yeah. So thank you. Next one is on, uh, as you mentioned that the pilot projects or the implementation part of the proposal, if we have something on implementation of pilot to be done on ground. So you mentioned that we don't have an access to fly back to our country and do the round of things, but uh, do can we prepare some kind of frameworks or guidelines that can be implemented on ground rather not happening on the ground? It's more like a guidance document or a proposal framework for the city, or at national level, that can be implemented by any of the ministries or something, which can be submitted to them. This
Yeah,
can be part of a
absolutely.
larger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That was also one of the things that I had proposed to do, to write a policy brief that would go as that I would do outreach for at the end of the year, and go meet people within the governance structure and talk to them about what are possible changes. So absolutely, you can have governance frameworks that are your end result, or whatever that you intend to get at the end of this year.
Yeah, and during our this fellowship phase, how much support we get from our host, either the host are professors or organizations. So how much help or guidance can we accept, or are they involved in our project? Because as I've seen, have interacted with different fellows on LinkedIn, so majorly have highlighted that some have highlighted that the professors or the host are too much involved, and some are like they don't either get bothered what you're doing or not. It is it an individual choice of host, or because I was thinking from the evaluation purpose at the last, how I will get evaluated of my successful fellowship year, like what is there some indicators that I need to achieve?
Yeah. So, like all the other fellows have told you, it's true. It's very, very dependent on your host. It's very, very dependent on their style and on what they expect of you, where they are in their career, what they are hoping for this relationship to be. So it's very individual individual to the host and individual to your relationship with the host, and it is not something that can be predefined. The only thing that the fellowship mandates is that you have like the host gives you a place of work, right? So if you're working in a lab, then access to a lab. But if you're working like me in a desk job, then an access to an office space and basic equipment that you need. And the the foundation provides the hosts with 500 or 800 euros, depending on, again, if you're in the social sciences, then 500 euros. And if you do natural sciences, where you need to actually do experiments and lab work, then you get 800, your host gets 800 euros per month. Those are the basic requirements. In terms of your evaluation at the end of the fellowship, like I mentioned, the foundation is very, very kind. They are very, very understanding of your situation, and that every individual's journey is different. And at the end of the year, it's not that, like, there's no real evaluation. There is an experience document. You need to present what you did in the year. You need to like talk about it. You need to talk about your research and your outcomes. And you need to talk about like your experience of the year. But it's not an evaluation. You are not being ranked. You're not being given scores. You're not put on any metric. There is absolute understanding that each one of us are very, very different researchers, and you don't get evaluated in any sense. So what your relationship with your host is does not affect your funding or anything. What it does affect is how you work. So if that's a thing that you are concerned about, then you should have that conversation with your host to try and understand what the fellowship will look like, right? So if they are the kind of host that, like, if you want a host um, that is more present, that they check in on you, they give you work beyond the fellowship. If you want someone like that, then you should align that with them in advance. If you're okay with a host that checks in on you every few months, or if they are there when you need them. So if, as long as you reach out to them on your work and they help you, you're good with that, then that kind of host can work for you. But you need to have that conversation with your potential host, and see what works for you. Does that make sense?
Sure, thank you. Yeah. Just one thing.
Go ahead.
You also mentioned that the proposal that you submitted, that was on Mumbai climate action thing, but at that earlier stage of fellowship, it got modified due to circumstances and the nature of the research that you were doing,
Yeah.
right? So does it get impact, or is it a natural thing that it can get modified based on the process? Because like, while we are proposing something, like, I'm from transport background, transport and energy background, and I'm proposing some kind of pilot implementation or some framework for a city. So if, let's say, during my course of time, I don't have that much duration available, so should I take that into consideration right now only in my proposal making, or as of now I can keep it, and at the later stage, if as much as time I have, it can get modified?
So I mean, that would depend, right? Like I mentioned to someone else who had asked me, I think Gokuram, I don't remember, but someone had asked me about like your proposal, right? When you're writing your proposal, you have to justify what you can do in 12 months, and it has to be a realistic picture of what you can do in 12 months. Um, I had thought I could do it. And so I was able to justify my Mumbai Climate Action Plan during the interviews because I genuinely believed that I could do it. It was only when I came here, and there is, of course, a lot changes, right? I started working on that proposal November of 2022. I actually started working on at the fellowship, like with my actual research after I came here in January, but I had 2 months of language course, I had 1 month of orientation. So by the time I actually started working on my research, it was April of 2024. It had been a year and a half since I wrote that proposal. And a lot of things changed in that time, right? So it was I met my professor in person, we discussed the proposal, and there was a realization that with the change in political context within Bombay, and also with the change, like with a more realistic understanding of what I thought I could do in Germany once I got here, and once I had a better sense of what working here, living here, everything else together would look like. It was too broad a scope for me to cover in 1 year. And so we decided to narrow down to different aspects. And therefore, I changed it. And I was able to change it because I had a host who was super supportive. I had a host who was very, very willing to let me modify it the way I wanted to modify it, and the way that made most sense for me and for my growth and for my learning, right? And like, therefore, what you propose should be like, you should believe that what you propose is something you want to do and what you can do. Whether or not you can modify it once you get here will be dependent on your host and you and the conversation you have with them. And you cannot take that to be given when you apply and you make your proposal right now.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, Karthik.
Yes, I remember that you mentioned that you came from the political science background and worked in the waste management, currently working in waste management and climate related program. So in this, you in the journey of finding host, that I also remember that you mentioned that your host also have had the background of political science, but doing work on climate change. So similar thing is I can relate with me because my master's is different, but I am working on climate change. So for the finding host, should I also go for the host who's came from the same master's background, but doing research in climate change? I hope you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I wrote to a lot of people. The way I went about it is that I looked at climate governance, urban climate governance. I went to Google Scholar and I found academics in Germany who were working on that area. And I wrote to a lot of them. Some of them were in political science because I was studying governance, and that is an extension of political science in some sense. But there were also people who were pure science researchers or nature-based researchers who were in nature-based solutions, researchers who worked in policy and didn't have political science backgrounds. I wrote to everyone. I happened to end up with someone who is a political scientist working on climate, but that is not essential. I would focus more on alignment with your current project topic and your current um, areas of work rather than your master's degree, because that doesn't really matter as much as your project proposal and the alignment of that with your host.
Okay, okay, thanks. As you mentioned that you also modified the topic after you get the fellowship. So, is your current research work is also aligned with the political science context somewhere, or it is totally different?
Yeah, so I am working on, like I mentioned, I'm working on these aspects, right? So like the Bombay Climate Plan has 5 different aspects. One of those is water, and I had not worked at all in water. So I started looking at water policy and implementation, and my research, like the work that I ended up doing for a large part of this year, ended up being looking at um, Chennai's rainwater harvesting policy and seeing what its successes and failures, but basically looking at it to see what it takes for climate programs to stick. Which is to say that what does it take for like a climate policy to be implemented in a city and not disappear when the government changes, or not disappear because it's been 10 years, not disappear because of whatever bureaucratical or political reasons, right? So I started looking at sticky implementation. That's also a government governance implementation policy problem. And it is looking at it through the lens of water policy in India and Chennai. And then I started working with GIZ's transport team because like that, the water stuff went somewhere, and then I wanted to look at another thing within that urban governance climate space. And sustainable transport was one of them. And now I've been working with GIZ's sustainable transport team for the last month and a half. I'm working with them for another month and a half as a part of this fellowship, and I'm understanding and working with them on understanding sustainable urban sand transport in cities around the world. Right? So yes, they're all governance related. They're all urban climate governance related. They're not necessarily political science, but that's not what I do anymore. Like what I do now is urban climate policy and urban climate implementation. So that's sort of, and the big paradigm of the 5 big things of Mumbai climate action plans are also the 5 big problems within cities for climate governance. So that's sort of the lens that I navigated or ended up navigating the year with.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. Are there any more questions? It's been a little more than an hour. So if we have any questions, we can do maybe a couple more, or we can call it an end. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming here. I will put this recording up somewhere so you will have something to refer to. And I hope your application goes well. I hope to see some of you in Germany sometime soon. All the best. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, Ananya.
Thank you, Sukanya, so much for this session.
No problem. See you.